According to a U.S. Department of Labor study, 64% of Americans who leave a job do so because they don't feel appreciated. 64%. That means that not only is appreciation the right and human thing to do, but that appreciation provided honestly and effectively is a business advantage. Today, we're talking with someone who knows much about the what's and whys of appreciation in the workplace. And so, welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, I'm glad that you are, but you could have been with us live. Well, now you could be with us for future episodes. If you're interested in that and watching and even participating, you can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups to know when they're happening. You can do that by going to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. Today's episode is brought to you by our newest product, the Productivity Intensive, a 45-day process to improve your productivity for life. Learn more by going to remarkablepodcast.com/productivity. remarkablepodcast.com/productivity. And with that, let me bring in our guest. And here he is. His name is Dr. Paul White. He is a psychologist, author, and speaker who makes work relationships work. Dr. White is the co-author of the best-selling book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, which has sold over 550,000 copies and has been translated into 25 languages. He has written articles for and been interviewed by the BBC News, Business Week, CNN, Fortune.com, Entrepreneur.com, Fast Company, Fortune, Fox, Business.com, the New York Times, U.S. News and World Report, the Washington Post, and Yahoo Finance. And now, today, he's a guest on our podcast. As a speaker and trainer, Dr. White has taught around the world for organizations including PepsiCo, Microsoft, NASA, L'Oreal, Ritz-Carlton, Starbucks, Boeing, HP, ExxonMobil, DirecTV, and many others. And I am so glad that he is our guest. Hello, sir. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Glad to have you all the way from Wichita, Kansas.
There you go.
As we get your day going and my day moving on, we got people today, let's see, from Billings, Montana is in the house. We've got Central Wisconsin in the house. I'm sure we have many others, and feel free, of course, to share that with us. We'll try to get you on the screen if you are, and if you do. So, Paul, my first question for you is, like, you didn't wake up when you were 5 and say, I think I'm going to be a psychologist. I'm going to write about appreciation in the workplace. Like,
Right.
Tell us a little bit about the journey that gets you to this place.
Yeah. So, Kevin, I grew up in the context of a family-owned business outside of Kansas City in Lawrence. So I'm a Jayhawk fan. And
I was really starting to like you.
yeah,
I'm just
sorry.
teasing. Listen,
Yeah.
if all goes well, your team and my team, Purdue, might play for a basketball national championship. That would
There
be,
you go. That'd be
make me
fun.
very happy. Anyway, go ahead.
So, I was trained as a psychologist in mid-career. Some friends of mine who were business consultants kept running into family issues because 85% of all the companies in the U.S. are family-owned. And so I started doing that, traveling around working with different businesses and families, really around business succession issues and wealth transfer. And I was with a family in North Carolina. I was talking to the dad, who was the CEO, and I said, how's this plan going? He says, it's going well. My son's stepping up. I think it's going to work. I walk across the hall and ask his son the same question. He says, this is a disaster. It's never going to work. I can't ever please my dad. And which I could understand from some personal experience. So my wife and I were reading The 5 Love Languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote, and has sold 25 million copies. And it's for personal relationships. And I thought, well, I wonder if this could work in workplace. So I pursued Dr. Chapman. It took me a year to get to him and meet with him and pitch the idea. And we decided to work on the project together, where we created an online assessment, which became the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory. 400,000 people have taken it. And then developed some training materials for organizations and started to use that, and then wrote the book. And so sort of has gone from there.
And now a second edition, I guess, of the book is the way to say that, right?
Yeah, and actually a third one's coming out in October. So rewrote and updated the research. We have over 50 now I think 55 citations on sort of the practical impact that appreciation has in the workplace, and then rewrote the chapter on remote and hybrid workers because that whole scene has changed quite a bit.
It has, and we'll talk a little bit more about that before we're done. So this is perfect. So edition number 3 has just come out when you, as you might be listening to this on the podcast, not out yet as we're doing this live. So one of the things you talk about early in the book, I agree with it 100%, but it's worth us talking about. I'm confident you've heard this 100,000 times. Like appreciation, that's really nice. I want to pat you on the head. Thank you so much, Paul, for that, for all this nice fuzzy stuff. But you would say that appreciation is a good investment in our
Right.
businesses. Why is that?
Well, yeah, most business leaders think mistake the primary goal of appreciation in the workplace. They think it's to make people feel good or happy, and we want that to happen. But it really is to help make an effective, functional organization. And I use the example of sort of like oil in a machine. You know, you have an engine, and it has parts working together and all that, and you have friction, which creates heat, sometimes sparks, can get stuck if it doesn't have any ability to move. And I think appreciation is like that as well. It helps the organization function well. And we know that lots of good things happen when team members feel valued and appreciated. Tardiness goes down, calling in sick when they're not really sick goes down, absenteeism, turnover goes over down, which we know is the sort of single most non-productive cost in the business. Productivity and profitability go up. Um, Customer service ratings go up. Less conflict, and actually managers enjoy their jobs better when their team feels valued. So a lot of good things happen that you know, and actually now with the SEC and in Europe as well, they're setting out standards for paying attention to human capital because companies that do outperform profitability those that don't. And so, from an investor point of view, you want to know whether or not somebody is actually paying attention to that and has some systematic approaches to helping uh, value their team members.
So let's go back. I should have done this already. Go back and close the loop on the story you said about the dad says this transition is going great. Son says this is a disaster. What role did appreciation or lack thereof between dad and son, I'm assuming, play in that disparate view of the same world?
Well, I mean, it was like no matter what the son did, he never felt like it was enough, right? And didn't hear anything positive. You know, I've had leaders. I actually got a cartoon that says, you know, if I stop by your desk and don't say anything, count that as a compliment. You know, and
Well,
so
you're doing your job. I
yeah,
should
yeah,
don't need to tell you I appreciate that you're doing your job, right?
exactly, exactly. And that you know, work is about work, and it's not just about feelings. It's about getting things done. But the reality is when team members feel valued and appreciated, things get done. We know that when they don't, creative problem solving goes down because that takes energy. And if you don't feel like anybody cares or is going to notice, why put it forth?
Why put
So,
forward energy, right?
yeah,
So innovation, creativity, engagement, all these things start to be impacted. So, but what about the people, Paul, that would say, "Well, listen, I'm paying my people well. They're getting a
yeah,
paycheck, and that ought to be enough." Or the people say, "I get what you're saying, Paul, but I'm a leader somewhere in the middle. I don't have any impact on the pay piece. Like,
mm,
how does pay fit into this? You're painting this rosy picture,
yeah,
but what about pay?"
yeah. Three points. One, we have over 100 years of research that shows that increasing pay and compensation does not improve employee satisfaction and engagement. Uh, a raise in pay will last for about 2 to 3 months as far as impacting a person's view of the job. But after that, if everything stays the same, it goes away. Secondly, there was a study that showed across a number of organizations, 89% of managers um, felt that employees left for more pay. Only 18% of those employees said that they did. And really fascinating, MIT school, Sloan School of Business just recently published research about the Great Resignation, and 3 times better prediction from how well people felt appreciated versus compensation issues on whether they were going to leave or not. So, and it's not, 30%, it's three times, it's a huge factor. And whether or not we agree with it, I mean, it's sort of like,
Or
welcome to
whether we think
reality.
it should be right. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And it's sort of like, this is the way it is, so you can either deal with it or not. And I worked with a major hospital system. I had a nurse manager say, I only show appreciation when people do above and beyond, which is fine. She did that, but she had the highest turnover rate of any unit in the hospital. So, got to pay attention.
That's shocking right there. When people ask me, Paul, in a workshop or when I'm coaching someone, they say, well, what about pay? I said, well, you better pay them, because if you quit writing them a paycheck, they're going to quit coming to work. But that's the all it is. Like, that's it.
Yeah, that's
Everything.
the minimum.
That's not the whole reason. Right? That's like table stakes. And then we go from there, right? We can have conversations about whether we're paying our people compared to benchmarks and all this stuff. But at the end
Right.
of the day, your point, I love your statement. I'll probably borrow it sometime in the future. We have 100 years of research that says there's no
Yeah.
real good correlation here.
Yeah.
And anytime I bring up that idea to someone about how long does pay matter to you, well, first couple of months, first 2 or 3 paychecks, like, yep, that's what the research says.
Yep. That's right.
Right. So I love all that. Now, we're going to talk about appreciation, obviously, in the rest of our conversation, or continue to talk about it. And all of us are here, or most everyone is here, because they're a leader, either by title or by action, or both.
Right.
And yet you would say this conversation isn't just for us as leaders. Like, this isn't just about us providing appreciation as the boss, right?
Yeah.
It's more than
Yeah.
that. Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, when Dr. Chapman and I started and down this path about 2010, 2011, we did focus on managers and leaders. But pretty quickly, we both realized and got feedback that people want to know they're valued and appreciated by their peers. So it's not that the leaders aren't involved, but it's not solely their responsibility. And the other part is it's too much weight and responsibility for the leaders to carry themselves. And what we found is by training team members how to communicate appreciation, authentic appreciation, to ways that are meaningful to the recipient, you really have an impact. And what we found is we tend to not go into an organization and just do sort of a top-down implementation. We'll sort of do maybe some a seminar or education to everybody so they understand the concepts, have the same language, but then we'll ask for people that want to do it and with their team. And so we'll pick out 2 or 3, do a pilot group with them, and then it tends to grow just sort of naturally across the organization. In fact, what happens is people that aren't part of the initial groups, they say, well, why do they get to do this and we don't? All right. And we win people over. We're going all the way across Miller Coors, DirecTV. We're working with PepsiCo Global. And so it's a both and, right? It's not an either or. And I think the other part about it is that appreciation for us is about the person. It's not just about performance. Employee recognition programs, latest research shows 94% of all companies in the US have some form of employee recognition. It may be as small as getting an email on your birthday, but we know that they don't work in making people feel valued and appreciated. They weren't designed to do that. I mean, they really were designed to set up goals, monitor those, and reward people who meet those goals. And it's very organizational. It's pretty generic, feels pretty impersonal. A lot of employees have a pretty sarcastic, if not cynical, view about employee recognition. And what we found is when we bring the person into it, because you know what, one of the things we learned from the COVID pandemic is that employees are people. Right? We have lives.
Hopefully we already knew that. But yes, I think a lot of people were reminded of
I
that.
think they sort of lost. I mean, it's more like, well, they're a production unit, I mean, yeah, but they're more than that. And our lives impact work impacts our lives. And so, and also people want to be valued for who they are, not just what they do. And so, which really provides an interesting opportunity, because in recognition, typically the top 10 or 15% of any team are the ones that are recognized. And it's sort of the same ones over and over. That means you have the big middle group, 50, 60% of people who are good, solid, they're trying, they're working, but they don't hear anything. What happens if you don't hear anything? You leave. So that group is at risk for leaving, which you can't. You can have a star quarterback and a receiver, but if you don't have blockers, you're not going to win. And so it's pretty cool to be able to then also focus on them as a person. And that doesn't mean we deal with low performers, but let's just say they're okay. All right. Well,
They're solid. They're doing their work. They're doing their
yeah,
job.
yeah, but they're not going to hear anything. So, what else can you value about them? I like to work with cheerful people more than grumpy people, and I have a team member who's just got a delightful laugh and smile. And I say, Becky, you just light up the room. Is it about her work? No. Is it about her? Yes. And it creates that connectivity. And connectivity is huge these days with remote and hybrid and workers. And this is one way to build that.
So yeah, I absolutely love that. And I really appreciate, I was going to get there, but I really appreciate you bringing out this idea of recognition versus appreciation, because they're not the same. And
Right.
like almost everyone would agree with what you said, that most of us look at those a bit with a bit of a scance, like, okay,
Right.
how genuine is this? How real is this? All those sorts
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah. It's like, okay, it's IT's term. Who in IT is going to get it this month? I mean, it's sort of, it feels that way lots of times.
Well, even and here's the thing, even if that's not how it was meant, and
Ah,
even if that's not what it actually is, if that's people's perception,
yeah.
that's their reality, right?
It's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem. I love that. So, okay, so let's go back to where we started. There's this book that 25 million copies of which have been sold about the love languages, right?
Right.
And so you pursued Dr. Chapman, which is a story probably I would love to hear, but may not be what we need to talk about on the podcast. And so the book that we're talking about the book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. Here it is. And so are they the same 5 languages?
They're the same in name, but they look differently
Yeah.
in how they're applied.
So
Right?
let's talk. I guess I knew that. It was just my way to get us there, right? So let's talk.
That's
Let's
good.
talk about that for a second. Why don't you just lay out the 5, and then we don't have time to go deep in any of them, but we'll pick
Right.
on a couple of them a little
Yeah.
bit. So, like,
So
what are the 5
yeah.
as they're connected now and thinking about it, appreciation at work?
Sure. So words of affirmation, it's pretty straightforward. They're words that are affirming. We're affirming the value of somebody. And the more specific you are in what you communicate, the more likely it's going to be perceived as authentic. So in fact, we have 85,000 people in our subscriber newsletter, and we do polls. One thing that people don't want to hear is good job. Why? It doesn't mean anything. You can say it to your kid, anyway. So you might say, Bob, thanks for staying late and getting that report done so that I have it to turn into my supervisor tomorrow. So it's their name, specifics, and why it's important to you or the organization. Second one.
And before you go on there, I want to tie people back to something else you just said. It doesn't have to be about the work. That's a perfect example of words of affirmation as being feedback. But you talked about it earlier. Feedback can be more than that. It can be about the
person,
personality,
let
the
me
approach
give
that they bring.
Yeah, you might have a team member. It's called Maria, and she's a single mom. She's super committed to her kids. And you say, Maria, man, I am just so impressed with how much you love your kids and you're committed to them. And I see you,
doing this,
leaving work and that and that. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be about work. Quality time is an interesting one in that it really has sort of a generational split on it. Those of us that are a little bit older, quality time means or meant individual time with your supervisor or manager, and being able to, share observations or get feedback and input, or just being with them, you feel valued. For younger workers, I mean, I tell older leaders, just because you have a team member who has quality time as their language does not mean they want time with you. Okay, you may be wonderful, you may be great, but it's that they want to be with their colleagues, and so going out to lunch together, going out after work, or even working together. So quality time is about spending time with people that you value, and because they're sharing their most important, really, resources, their time.
And so remember, everybody, we're not just talking about the horizontal boss team member, right? That's
Right.
a part of quality time. But as we've already said, this is also a not just a vertical conversation, but a horizontal conversation. And
Absolutely.
so quality time also could mean with my colleagues. And I think we'll talk about a little bit about distributed work, remote work, hybrid work. And that I think in some ways becomes even more important then because we're not getting that.
Yeah.
Right. We're not
Yeah.
getting that. It provides that chance for connectivity as well, which you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Third one is acts of service.
Right. Acts of service is not rescuing a low performing colleague. It's doing something that helps make their day or week go better. And there's sort of two easy contexts of that. One is you're working on a time limited project, working hard, banging away, longer hours. What's something somebody can do to help you out with that? Whether that's bring in dinner so you can keep working, or could maybe that they delegate part of it, or they help answer the phone and email so you can stay focused on it. The other one is if you're more of a service kind of setting, a whole bunch of customers or patients show up all at once. What can you do to help manage that flow? And acts of service people, man, if you just talk to them, it may not go well. I mean, they're like, words are cheap. Don't tell me you support me, show me.
Roll up your sleeves, come help. And the higher you are as a leader, the less able you are to actually help. So you got to find other ways to do it. And I'll tell
Yeah,
you something, Paul, and you can certainly say, well, Kevin, maybe not. But one of the things that I do as a leader of a remote team is if I need to talk to somebody, I don't just say, hey, I need 5 minutes. I say,
absolutely.
when can we have a conversation? In other words, leaning into what their need is rather than just, well, I'm the most important person
Especially
here.
true across time zones, right? More and more
100%.
we got across the country, across countries, setting up a call or a video conference when it's convenient for them rather than for you is really an act of service.
Number four,
Tangible gifts. Tangible gifts. It's not compensation, bonuses, raises, big vacations. It's small things that show that you're getting to know them as a person and what they like. Their favorite cup of coffee. If you get bagels, what kind of bagels they like, or if you order pizza. I have a team member who's gluten intolerant, so when we order pizza, we get gluten-free pizza. Or just listen to what's going on in their life, and maybe they're starting to coach a soccer team for the kid, and you either get them a magazine or maybe even a website that has like training activities. It doesn't have to cost money, and so or they're let's see, you're in Indianapolis, so let's say they're an Indianapolis Colts fan, which you would then really offer condolences because I'm a Chiefs fan, but
hey, we beat you last year,
yeah,
and
that's
we
fair.
won
That's fair.
yesterday. So yes,
Yeah, there
but
you
I
go.
understand. I understand what
Yeah,
you're saying.
but you get them an NFL, magazine about the different teams or whatever. So it's just small stuff that shows that you're paying attention and say, hey, I saw this. I thought you might like it. Okay. It's not a big deal. What's interesting is only 7% of all workers choose tangible gifts as the main way they want to be shown appreciation. So a lot of companies, to be honest, waste a lot of money throwing out gifts and stuff like that. The one way to offend somebody that really does value gifts is give everybody the same thing because
Especially if it has the company logo on it.
especially
It
the
made me
company
laugh. I'll
logo.
tell you a quick story about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was working with a large beverage company everybody would know, and the people said, hey, we feel like walking billboards, because that was like there was a secondary gain for the company by giving it to them. So yeah, find out what they want and but make it individual.
Individual, and which is sort of the point. And we've got one more of these languages to get to in a second. The one that I will say has an asterisk at work.
Yeah.
But before we get there, I mean, part of the big idea here is figuring out which language works best for everybody. And
Hmm.
so the sub point of that around the gifts piece is like, if you give me something that matters to me, like I'm a reader, give me a book. Cool. I'm not a reader. Don't give me a book. Right.
Exactly.
Or if we're all going to read a book, that's fine, but then don't expect that I think that's a gift. I just think that's work.
Exactly. And actually, we do research all the time. We did research, I think, with 90,000 people on actually what kind of gifts they like. And, gift cards are in there, but there's two types of people that want different kinds of gift cards. One is a generic gift card, Amazon, Visa, whatever, that they can use it for anything. Other people want it very specific, Cabela's, the bookstore, iTunes, or so they can't use it on everything, that you
So
paid attention to.
they're actually picking their gift rather than just giving them a
A
bonus.
generic, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So the fifth of the love languages, as translated into the languages of appreciation, is that of physical touch. And people
Yep.
will be going, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, Paul!
Yep,
What are you
yep,
talking
yep.
about here?"
When I talk to leaders or HR professionals, I throw up a slide of somebody that's fainted because, oh, we're going to get sued. So the real reality is, one is we didn't want to create or facilitate a workplace environment that's totally touchless, because appropriate touch in healthy relationships, appropriate situations would be deeply meaningful if somebody's had a tragedy in their life or something like that. It varies culturally, right? But largely it happens, and it's spontaneous celebration, right? It's a high five when you finish a project. It's a fist bump when you solve a problem. It's maybe a congratulatory handshake. And our work is used all over, both worldwide and in the US. In the South, I lived in Atlanta. They could do side hugs. In New York, this is what in New Jersey, what it looks like. Hey, that's about as close as they get. But our Latin and Hispanic friends tend to be more warm. And so it feels very cold to them if there's no, kind of physical connection. But it's less than 1% of the population, and it's always the recipient is the one who gets to decide whether or not it's
It was
appropriate.
valuable or not, right?
Yeah, and so uh, we don't worry about it a lot, but you just have to be aware that for some people it's okay, and if you're one of those people that physical touch is okay, you've got to be careful about the other person to make sure that it's okay with them.
And so you've said it multiple times, and you've talked about the assessment. The assessment helps all of us individually to determine which is our primary, which of those matter most to us. And yet there's two situations I want us to talk about before we finish, and one is generational difference. We've hinted at this a dab, but like, okay, we got these five languages of appreciation. Are they significantly different for those in different generations?
Yeah, yeah. So we did research last year on it. I don't know, it was 350,000 people that we had results of. And what we found is that the order or rank remains the same. Words is the top for everybody. For the general populations, it's 46%, which is important to note because that means that words is less than half of all employees. So if you only use words, you're missing half of the people that you want to encourage by using their primary language. Secondly, so quality time second is about 26%, acts of service is 21, and then like we said, tangible gifts is about 7. Across generations, the order stays the same, but it starts to get closer where quality time raises from 26 up to 35%. So, and in fact, as we looked at generations, are actually sort of decades, 60s, people are 50, 40, and all that. The younger you went, the more likely quality time was going to be important to them. But again, you got to remember, it's not time with you, it's probably time with their colleagues. So that means to schedule some things that they do or allow them to have time to go out to lunch and maybe come back a little bit late would be a way to communicate appreciation to those team members.
So
Um,
that means acknowledge it, but then not only just allow it, but encourage it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Provide the
yeah,
space for it. I think is
exactly.
critical, right? So I think that's important. And then we've bumped against this, but we need to take a minute or two on this. What are some extra things we need to be thinking about doing in relationship to these languages of appreciation when we're leading and when we're working remotely, distributed in some way?
Yeah, we found three things. One is you need to be more proactive because you don't have those chance encounters in the break room or elevator or parking lot where you sort of chat with people, or even before a meeting, right? Where you come in a little bit early and you chat. Secondly, you need to focus on building peer relationships. We did research during and after COVID. People that managed the stress better during COVID, one of the key factors is they stayed connected with their colleagues at a personal level. It wasn't with their supervisor, it was their colleagues, and it was about what was going on in life, how the kids are doing, you know, how their sports team is doing, and all that. And so you need to facilitate that. And in remote settings, I mean, that either can be one-on-one, say, hey, I'd like to catch up with you, when you have 5 or 10 minutes to chat and you set up a time, or when you have, a video conference, set it up early and let people come in early and chat, or stay late. Now, if you're the host, you got to stay late, because otherwise everybody goes off, right?
100%. People walk into a conference room not when the door gets unlocked, but they just
Yeah,
walk in and they start chatting. And so if
yeah,
we will set up that room or allow anyone to set it up, then that changes that dynamic. I agree with that
yeah.
100%.
And in fact, so on our assessment, what we call the MBA inventory, we've created different versions for different industries: schools, medical, government, so forth. We've also created a remote version, because the actions vary across settings. An active service in the trades is maybe stopping by and helping clean up the workspace at the end of the day.
Yep.
In a hospital, it's helping with charting or whatever. And so we've created action items that work remotely or across long distances.
I love that. I just want to highlight, you mentioned the word being more proactive. In our book, in our work leading to our book, The Long Distance Teammate, that was the single most important thing.
Hmm.
Not only in our experience working with clients, but in the research that we did. It's the word that came up most often. It's the thing that has the most impact, being more proactive. It's the first P in our 3P model. Like, I completely 100% agree with that. Even though we were coming at it maybe from slightly different perspectives, the
Sure.
output is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So is there anything, Paul, that you wish I would have asked that I didn't?
Not so much that, but let me just finish with this, and that is leaders. And I work with, like, engineers and computer science people, and they want to develop a big system and sort of apply it to the whole thing, and that's good. But you can get stuck there. And the one thing I would just encourage you is start somewhere with someone. It's sort of like most diets don't work if you don't start, or an exercise program.
I think pretty much all of them don't work.
Yeah. So same thing here. Think of somebody that you really value, that if they didn't do what they did, your life would be tougher. Or somebody you don't want to lose, because we know 79% of the people who leave because they don't feel valued. So think about that. Think specifically what you value about them, and then communicate it. And it's fine to start with words, even though that may not be theirs. Don't do it publicly. We know 40% of people don't like to be recognized publicly. And be as specific as you can, and it should go well. So start out, and then I would say just look at our resources. We've got training resources. You don't have to get the book to apply this stuff. We have codes for people to take, and that's at appreciationnetwork.com. There you go.
Appreciationnetwork.com. So I've got a couple more things before we go. I'm going to shift gears on us,
Cool.
Paul. What do you do for fun? Apparently you're a Chiefs fan, but other than that, what do you, and Chiefs and Jayhawks, like, I'm
There you go.
happier with one of those than the other, but like, what do you do for fun, Paul?
Yeah, I enjoyed college sports. I really like to fish, and also I deal with trees. I plant trees and I trim trees and that kind of stuff. And just getting out in nature and experience the beauty of creation is really rejuvenating to me.
I love that. What are you reading these days, Paul?
We were talking earlier. I just came back from a week of travel, and I just finished the book Pioneers by David McCulloch. He's a sort of major history guy, and it was about what they called the Northwest Territory, which was really Ohio.
If you go back far enough, that was the
Yeah,
Northwest
yeah, it was
Territory.
in the 1700s, and just the pioneers and the frontiersmen, and wow, what tremendous perseverance those people had, and also just heartbreak setbacks that just happened. I mean, whether it was floods or disease or whatever, it was just encouraging to be thankful. But man, we have so much to be thankful for. We live like kings used to live, as far as all the things we have. So that was good.
And even better, right?
Mm.
So Paul, we've talked about appreciation at work.com. We've talked about the book a little bit, the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. Where can we learn more? Where do you want to point people? Anything else you want to tell people?
I think the appreciationatwork.com one is sort of the mothership website, and it's got information about book, about training resources we put together, so that you can have an internal person learn how to lead teams through this. We've done research, and I've written on toxic workplaces. It's got that information there. So that's the best place to go.
Appreciationatwork.com, everybody. And Paul, you took some of my thunder, which is fine, with your final thought about go appreciate someone. But if you're with us and you've been with me before, I'm going to always close with this question. now what? What action are you going to take? And I can't think of a better one than what Paul suggested, which is go appreciate someone today. Be specific, be personal, and maybe words isn't the perfect one for them, but it's not likely their least appreciated language. And so if we can do that, that's an awfully good place to start. You got a lot of good ideas as you listen through this conversation. And ideas are wonderful, but it's actions that will make a difference. I hope that you will consider that question, and whatever that is, including what Paul suggested, it's an awfully good place to start. Paul, thanks so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm glad we had the chance to have it.
Kevin, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it.
Everybody, that concludes another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Hope you'll join me again next week. You know I'll be back for another episode. Between now and then, if you haven't gone back into the archive, dip your toes back there. And why not invite someone else to take a listen to the next episode with you of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.